Hi guys, I'm Justin Davis, a Salesforce consultant. I help people with the various aspects of Salesforce.
Hi, I'm Debbie, a sales head. Our company has decided to implement Salesforce to manage inbound leads and follow-up reporting. We will be trained on Salesforce shortly.
Well, that's good. I believe it will also help them in their career growth.
However, I'm struggling to understand how Salesforce will help us to manage inbound leads and other aspects.
You know, Debbie, that's an excellent question. Companies looking for managing inbound leads and follow-up reporting are slowly moving to Salesforce for automating this process. Most sales teams are challenged with managing inbound leads, including assignment, logging activities, and follow-up. The leads object in Salesforce allows sales managers to assign inbound leads from websites through lead assignment rules. The activities object allows for the reporting of tasks such as outbound calls and events such as in-person meetings. Lastly, reports can be created to display closing rates and average length of sales cycles.
Great! I can't wait to get started.
In this lesson, what you'll learn is creating and converting leads, creating accounts and contacts, and email templates and sending mass emails, creating price books, products, opportunities, and activities, creating a web-to-lead form and lead assignment rules, and creating campaigns. To get started, the first thing we're going to talk about here is the Leads homepage. The Leads homepage is used to view lists of data, import leads, transfer leads, use the mass email leads tool, as well as mass add leads to campaign. So if you can see over here on the right-hand side, this is a screenshot of the Leads homepage, and now we're going to jump into Salesforce and actually see the real thing. So I'm logged in here, and you can see I'm at the homepage. So to jump to the Leads tab, I'm going to click on Leads, and then as you can see here, this is the Leads homepage. So there's usually a lot of confusion about what exactly the homepage is for specific objects, because you also have this Home tab up here. Each of these tabs across the top that actually point to different objects actually have their own homepage. So if you could see here, it says Leads Home. Just to be very, very clear, this is the Leads homepage. So just to sort of peruse this, you can see that we are looking at recently viewed leads. You can also look at recently created or unread leads that maybe were assigned. You can also see different reports down here, such as the lead lifetime report, a leads by source. And then down here you also have tools such as import leads, mass delete leads, etc. So we're going to talk about the tools first. So if I click on this import leads link, it's actually going to take me directly to the data import wizard. And so later on in this course, we actually talk about importing data. But for now, you just need to know that if you want to quickly import a list of leads, you can jump to this Leads home tab here and click on that import leads link. You can also mass delete leads. So let's say you do an import of leads that you actually want to end up deleting. Again, we're going to talk about this later on in the course under data management, but it does take you directly to the mass delete function in Salesforce. The next link down here is the transfer leads link. So if I click on transfer leads, I can actually do just that. I can transfer leads from one user to an active user inside of Salesforce. And the filters for this are very similar to the mass delete. Essentially, you can choose what leads you want transferred based on the different criteria here. Then you click Find, and you can actually transfer those over. It's not a commonly used feature in Salesforce, but it is important to know that it exists. The next one here is mass email leads. So this is a pretty popular option. So if I click on that, it'll actually take me to the mass email tool in Salesforce. Again, this is something we'll talk about later on. But in short, I can click on Go here, and it's going to show me a list of all the leads I have in the system. And I can click Next, and I can step through the different steps of sending a mass email, which we'll go into later on. But essentially, that's what that's for there. And then down here last, we have the mass add leads to campaign. So what we can do is actually select a campaign and add those leads to it. We'll talk about this later on when we talk about campaigns. But from the Leads homepage here, you have access to all these tools. The next thing I want to talk about is list views. And to do that, we're going to jump back to the presentation. So in Salesforce, we have a feature called list views. So here are some of the aspects of the list views in Salesforce. You can quickly access lists based on type and criteria. You can filter based on campaign and ownership. You can also control security through roles and groups. You can use up to 10 rows of filter criteria. You can also create advanced logic grouping of the criteria as well, which we'll get to. You can drag and drop the different columns of the list to reorder them. You can also sort on those columns and make changes to the data directly from the list. So we're back into Salesforce here, and we can see that I can click on this list view option here. I can look at all open leads. To do so, I'm going to click Go, and it's going to return a list of leads that I have in this particular Salesforce account. So if I want to change through my different lists, I can click on today's leads, and this is what an empty list would look like. I can also look at any unread leads that have been assigned to me. These would be leads that I own that I actually haven't clicked on and I haven't actually seen yet. So if I click on this particular Laura lead here, I click on the leads tab and I go back to my unread leads, you can see that that specific lead is now off the list because that's a lead that I've actually seen. So I'm going to go to all open leads and edit. So now at this point, I'm going to click on edit, and I have the ability to make some changes here. So for starters, I can change the view name. So the view name is the name of the list that's seen by everyone else. I can also change the unique name. So this is a name that's referenced by Salesforce mainly for programming purposes. Not a lot is done against list view as far as programming is concerned, but there is a unique name for the lists in the system. Usually, if you type out the view name, it's just gonna fill in that unique name for you like it does elsewhere. So to keep going, we can also choose based on if the leads have been converted or not. And so you can choose all unconverted leads or my unconverted leads. You can also choose from different queues. We'll talk about queues later on as well. But if you've set up a queue as a holding area to hold your leads and you don't want them assigned yet, you can also choose that here and check that radio button. We can also filter based on the campaign. So if there's a specific campaign based on the leads that you want to see, you can put in that campaign name there as well. Now, there's also some pretty cool things you can do with the actual lists themselves. So the filter themselves, I should say. So over here, you can see all of the different fields that are on the leads. So you can get really specific. So you can say, I want leads with a created date of this month, for example, and I want the state to be, CA. And what you can come down here and do is say, I want 1 and 2 to be grouped together as logic. And then I can also come over here and say, or the title equals CEO. And so what that would do is it would show me a list where regardless of title, that if the created date was this month for the lead and the state equals CA for California, show me those leads. Or show me all leads with the title of CEO. So this might be a situation where a sales manager is trying to, filter out the best leads or the hottest leads possible. And the sales manager is saying, well, if the lead was created this month and they're in our local area, let's say California, we want to see those leads. Or if they're elsewhere, somewhere like, Texas or New York or what have you, if their title is CEO, we want to see those too. So it's as if to say, if the title is CEO, that's just as good as any leads created this month based in California. So to continue on, I can also choose which fields to display. So over here on the left-hand side, again, I have a list of all of the different fields that are on leads. I can simply select here and hold down the control key and add those to the list and do just that. I can also remove fields accordingly, remove those columns from the list view. And lastly, down here, we have the ability to restrict list visibility. So I can make this list visible only to me, to all users, or to only groups of users. Now, this feature can be a little bit misleading because it doesn't actually restrict access to the leads themselves for individual users. What it does is it restricts access to the list itself. So, for example, if I click on the Leads tab here, I can see all of these different lists. Now, I may not have access to a list called, Susan's Leads, but if there's a lead on that list that I have access to, I can always do a search in Salesforce to pull up that lead. So it's not necessary that you have leads in a list in order to see them. So that's just an important consideration because, sometimes there's a little bit of confusion on, what exactly is being restricted down here at the bottom. So the next thing we're going to do is create a new list. So I'm going to click on the Leads tab here and create a new view. So I'm going to call this new list California. And as you can see, when I tab down, it automatically filled in that unique name for me, so I didn't even have to change that. So down here, I don't have any filters in place. It's just essentially a blank list. So what I want to do is come over here and filter based on the state and province. Now I want to make the CA or California. And the reason that I type out both is in case someone has filled out my web to lead form and they put CA as a state rather than California, I want those to be, I want those to be caught. I want those to be showing up on the list. I'm also going to come down here and add a few fields. I'm going to add industry and I want to add the title. Now, as I've added them, you can see they're added down here at the bottom. Well, I really want the title to be up to the name, so I'm going to move that up to the top. So I'm going to have the name and title together, and I also want the industry to be right behind the company. Now, this is a list I only want to see myself. I don't want others to see it as an option. So at this point, I'm just going to leave this as visible only to me, and I'm going to click Save. So you can see here that nothing comes back. That's because none of the leads in this Salesforce org fit that criteria. So when this happens, rest assured that there's nothing wrong with Salesforce. Your leads are still in there. It's just the list view is too strict. And a lot of times users will see an empty list and they'll say, well, I don't see anything, or Salesforce doesn't have those records. The reality is you could always search for those records and pull them up. It's just that the list view criteria, there's something wrong with it there. So you can take measures to actually troubleshoot. So for example, let's say that, we're collecting the state and for some reason the state's not coming over into the system. What if I delete this out? I can actually use a blank value as part of the filter criteria. So I'm going to click Save again and I'm going to see what happens. Great, so now we see that we have all these leads in the system. And if you look, the state and province column is actually blank. So if the leads don't fit the criteria to the list, then they're not going to show up in the list at all. So that's just a little bit about list views. You can create views and share them with others. You can also copy them. For example, if I want to copy this list, what I could do is call it New List California 2, for example, and I'm going to add a 2 behind the unique name and then click Save As. And what that's going to do is it's going to just copy that list, the list view I should say, and it's going to create that as an option here. So the next thing we're going to talk about here is actually creating leads in Salesforce. When creating leads, there are a few considerations. You want to create a record for any prospective customers. You want to log your initial activities such as cold calls, create notes on conversations, and it's also a holding area for the different mass marketing tools like Pardot and others that will actually use those leads for marketing purposes. So a lot of times there's questions regarding the difference between a lead and a contact, or a lead and an account, or even a lead and an opportunity. Well, the funny thing is that leads actually end up being a part of all three of those. So the purpose of leads in Salesforce is really to be this last bullet point here. It's really a holding area for your cold prospects. So if you sell truck parts, and you've got someone that's inquiring about, maybe, tanker services, Well, you don't offer what that person's looking for, they never make it past a lead. But if someone calls you and they own a trucking company and they want to look to a new supplier for their parts, that's perfect. You would actually convert that lead because it's qualified to a minimum level. And the second question that is often comes up is, well, what does that mean? What's the minimum qualified level for a lead? Well, that's really up to your business to determine. And, the general rule of thumb that I use, which is certainly not a hard and fast rule, is if you have, 100 leads and, 5 to 10% of them end up being what you would call qualified, then those are actually leads. But if you have, 100 leads and 30% of them are being qualified, those should actually be opportunities. So it's assumed that the majority of the leads, 90% plus, are probably not going to move forward. They're not going to move past that qualification stage. And, in other cases, there might be pre-qualification questions. For example, if you work for a real estate company and you're wanting to help someone buy a house and both of the people that want to buy the house don't have jobs, well, they would probably never make it past a lead because they're not even qualified to actually make that purchase. So, that's what a lead is for. Whereas accounts, contacts, and opportunities, which we'll talk about here shortly, that is for your active and or, qualified base of customers or clients. So now we're actually going to jump back into Salesforce and create a lead here. So I'm looking at the Leads tab, and at this point I can actually click on this new lead button, but I'm going to actually do it a different way, which is going to be a little bit more common. So the other way is if I click on this Leads tab, I can click on New, and that's actually to create a new lead. So a lot of time, Salesforce customers get confused between Create New View and this New button. So, it is a little bit confusing. They are close together for whatever reason. This Create New View link is to create a new list view, whereas this New button is to create a new lead. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to click on New, and I can scroll down a little bit and see all the fields. So you can see the different fields that we have on the page. So, for example, I'm going to fill out this lead. And, if you don't know the company, you could put, not available, something along those lines. Let's say it's somebody that you met at a coffee shop or on the plane and you're not really sure what the company is or work for, but maybe they give you their cell phone number. So you would just type in the different field values like so. And you can also change the lead status. The default is open. It's recommended just to leave it as open for now, and then I can click Save. Now what this will do is it will create a new lead and it'll make me the owner because I'm actually logged in and the one that's actually creating it. So it's at this point in time that a salesperson would come along and say, well, we've got a lead here, I've got a phone number, I'm going to call this guy and I'm going to see if they're interested in actually, making a purchase or, where they're at in the process. Now, once they do that, they can come down here and log a call, make any notes they want to make and click Save. And then it'll log that a call happened. So again, a lead is really a placeholder for those initial prospects, those, unqualified prospects. Now, when you're ready to convert, you'd click on this Convert button. Now, what's going to happen is it's going to grab the company name and create an account from it. And it's going to take the name field and create a contact. And then it's going to create an opportunity with both of those pieces of information. So just to review that one more time, when I click on this Convert button, Salesforce is going to take the company and it's going to create an account and it's going to take the name and create a contact. Now, the reason I bring that up now is if you don't have a company in here, then it might cause some confusion. So, data quality is really important. So if I want this to work, I need to actually put in the right company name, and it's a required field, by the way, so Salesforce doesn't let you get away without it. I need to put in that company name and click Save. So at this point, my lead is saved and I'm ready to convert. So now I'm going to click on this Convert button. So it brings me to this, sort of intermediary page in Salesforce called the Convert Lead page. Now, this is a page you really can't adjust. You can't determine what's required, what's not required. You just sort of have to live with it. So just to talk through these fields, I'm set up to be the record owner of all of those new records that we're going to create here in a minute. So Justin Davis would be the record owner. That's the default option, would be you as the user. I also have the option to check this checkbox to send an email to the owner of those new leads. Now, the only time that's necessary is if you've got a team that is actually nurturing the leads and actually converting the leads, and you want the salesperson to be notified that, hey, I've converted a lead, it's in your name, pay attention to it. If you're the person converting the lead, you don't need to send an email to yourself unless you just want a record that you converted that lead. So the next one here is account name. So this is pulling from that company field, if you notice. Now, if I click on this, you can see it only gives me the one option there. Now, if there are other accounts in Salesforce that match that truck parts name, then Salesforce is going to prompt you to say, instead of creating a new account, maybe you just want to add this new lead as a contact to that existing account. In this case, we don't have an account in that name, so Salesforce is suggesting just create a new account called truck parts. So the bottom line is the account in Salesforce represents the company. The next one here is the opportunity name. So we also have the ability to check this do not create a new opportunity checkbox. In this case, I'm going to leave it unchecked as the default. Now the opportunity represents the sale or that potential transaction. So what exactly do I mean by that? So opportunities actually represent your sales and your sales efforts. So if you put a proposal together, then that would be an opportunity. If you get a proposal or a contract signed, that's also on the opportunity. And we're going to talk about opportunities a little bit later on in this lesson. But for now, you just need to know that when you convert a lead, it's also going to create this opportunity unless you check that checkbox to tell it not to. The next thing we're going to talk about now is creating accounts. Accounts in Salesforce, which we've touched on briefly already, really represent the business, the organization, or in some cases the household that you're working with. So what that means is that if there's a company that you're selling to, that company name would be the account. If it's a nonprofit organization or some kind of government agency, that would also be an account. And if you're also selling to households, it would also be the household. So in the case of the household, obviously there's no company involved. You would generally put the family's last name and then put household. So you could put the Davis household in my case, or the Adams household, or whatever the case may be. You can put that in for the account name. Accounts can have multiple contacts and opportunities. So the whole point of the account is it's really the focal point of Salesforce. So accounts, you could consider it to really be the cornerstone record of everything else. So cases and in contacts, everything else sort of revolves around accounts, for better or worse. And the idea there is that you can have multiple contacts that are linked to a particular account. You can also have multiple opportunities. So you can have the, Truck Parts Inc. Corporation, the business there is the account. And then there are, 5 or 10 contacts linked to that particular account. Account name is the only required field. So when you create a new account in Salesforce, right out of the box, the only field that's required is the name. Now, if you look over here on the right-hand side, this screenshot does have a couple of other required fields. So you can actually go in and make fields, required, but out of the box, account name is the only one that truly is. So I'm logged back into Salesforce here, and I'm going to click on this Accounts tab to get started. Now on this tab, you can see very similar to, the leads home tab, which we just got done with. You can see, the different recent records and reports down here and tools. I'm just going to jump right to creating a new account and click on this new button. Now on this page, I'm being prompted to choose a record type. We're actually going to talk about record types later on, but as the name implies, it's really there to determine, what type of record you want to create. So there's a lot of advantages to using record types. For now, I'm just going to leave this selected as client and click on continue. So now I'm on a new account page. So what I would need to do here is just start typing in what I want the actual account name to be. and any other required field. So in this case, I'm going to choose, corporate. I'm going to choose a website, truckparts.com, probably a real website. And then in industry here, I can choose, let's say transportation, and click save. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to create a new account record. So on this account record, you can see I've got some other fields. So I can also open up the billing street and, billing address box. So here I can put in, the actual address. And if you don't have all the information, that's fine. You can just type in what you know and then save. So you can start to really build out the profile of the business right on this account record here. The next thing we're going to talk about is creating contacts on those specific accounts. So the features of a contact are quite simple. This is really what, CRM systems were designed around from the beginning. They store information on individuals. You can log interactions such as tasks and events. You can also sync them with Outlook or Gmail. You can also do that on leads, but it's primarily done on contacts because the contacts that you have are, the actual individuals you really want to be talking to. So we're going to jump into Salesforce again here, and we're actually going to create a new contact. So we're at my Truck Parts Inc. account. So now I'm going to click on the new contact button. So I'm going to click new contact, and I can actually type in who I want that new contact's, what I want their name to be, and click save. And it's real simple. It just simply creates a new contact record. Then I can come over here and actually fill in that individual's title. I can fill in any other information relative to them. But if I want to jump back to an account, I can click on the account link and do so. Now, I only have one contact on here. So if I want to, I can come over and, add another contact. Let's say Tom Cruise here. So it'll save and reload this Tom Cruise contact. If I click on the account name again, it's going to bring me back and show me that now I have two contacts. So the idea is that you will have a running list of contacts associated with an account at any given time. The next thing we're going to talk about here is creating email templates. In Salesforce, we have the ability to send one-time emails and mass emails. You need to set up an email template in advance in order to do that. So, the features of an email template are here. So you can use them in one-time or mass emails. You can also create Visualforce email templates for advanced logic and merging. But most of the time, Salesforce customers will use a plain text version where you don't have any formatting options. It's really less than minimal. There's really no formatting that you can do. And then there's the HTML version where you can actually have, a more graphical look and feel. So you can add a logo, you can add pictures, all that kind of stuff. And that's what you would expect of any, modern CRM system, is to be able to, craft an email template that actually looks like, it was created on a professional basis. The plain text emails, usually those are used for internal emails. So for example, in Salesforce, you can set up a notification to go out, letting the group know that a sale was made. That doesn't have to be HTML. That could just be a plain text email in that case. So now we're actually going to jump into Salesforce here and create an email. So I'm logged back in and I'm on the Home tab. So what I want to do is click on Setup here in the top right corner. Now over here on the left-hand side, I want to expand communication templates, and I've got a couple of options. The simplest option is to click on Email Templates and then click on the New Template button. And then for now, we're going to create a text email. The concept is the same versus HTML, but for now, we're just going to create text. So you do have a couple of different options here. Funny enough, it says HTML using letterhead. That means you actually have to set up a letterhead in advance. That's not a commonly used function in Salesforce, so I'm actually going to skip that. Custom would actually give you the ability to create what most marketers would believe is a true HTML email template. So use that custom option if you're actually going to be creating the HTML from scratch, and you can just copy and paste that into the system. So for now, we're just going to choose text and then click Next. So scrolling down here, you can see a couple of different fields available. So The first one here is this available for use checkbox. So you definitely want to make sure that you check that. That will give you the ability to actually reference this email template when sending a one-time email or a mass email. So I'm going to call this, my new sales notification email template. And when I tab down, you can see it automatically filled in that unique name. So scrolling down here, I can choose the subject. So I can choose, new sale is made, something like that. Now I can also bring in field data. So field data from, let's say an opportunity or something else. So I can come over here and actually choose an available merge field. So I can select, let's say opportunities, and I can grab any of the fields that are on these specific opportunities. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this opportunity field here of, let's say the amount. So I can come over here and say copy and paste, and I can put in that opportunity amount directly into the subject. And I can also, type out here, new sale is made for, and then the opportunity amount. I can also put in a link to that opportunity here. So I can click on the detail link merge field option, and then I can copy and paste that here. So you can also do something like this, click here to see, let's say, and then what it'll happen is it's actually going to show a link to that specific opportunity there in that, that specific template. So when this email goes out using a workflow rule or some other means, it's actually going to grab that specific opportunity URL and put it in there. So when the group receives this email, they can just click on it and it'll take them right to that opportunity. We also have the ability to attach files. So, you can click on this attach file button and you can either browse from your computer, or you can also grab a file from within Salesforce as well. But your emails can have attachments. So let's say you want to create an email template that has your company's brochure or your company's, products and price catalog. You can actually attach that directly to the email template, and then when the recipient gets it, they'll see that attachment there as well. So that's the basics on creating an email template. So I can also go back and see a list of all the other email templates I have in here. So as you can see, I've got quite a few that are set up. So you can also change the different folders that are available. So I can come over here and put, sales emails, for example, and then I can make sure that all of my, sales-based email templates are actually going to be saved in that specific folder. So the folder options are pretty basic. You can grab any of the templates in the unfiled public folder there and move them over. You can also choose who sees the lists or not, and then click save. And then it'll just, better group those email templates. So that way when, the users in the system are referencing them, they can just click on that folder and grab the, the corresponding template. The next thing we're going to go over here is actually sending an email. So there's a couple of points to consider when sending individual emails from Salesforce. You need to use, the pre-existing templates if you want something standard in there. Otherwise, you can just, freeform type out what you want to say. But if you look on the screenshot on the right-hand side here, we have the ability of selecting a template and even attaching a file to a one-time email that we want to send. We can also add a CC or a BCC to that specific, email. Keep in mind that, if that's the case, usually you need to have a contact that's created in reference to that CC or BCC. You can also upload any kind of files directly from your computer to this specific email. You can also choose between HTML or text. Then you can also view a history of all the sent emails on your contacts and leads. So I'm back into Salesforce here, and over on the left-hand side, I'm going to click on, let's say, my John Adams contact. So if I scroll down to the bottom, I have the ability down here to actually send an email. Now, if you see a contact page layout that doesn't include the ability to send an email, then you're missing what's called the activities section. So that's a real simple fix. And so what you can do is up in the top right corner, click on Edit Layout as a system administrator. And then down here you have the ability to edit page layout. So over on the left-hand side, I can click on related lists, and I can do things like add, activity history, open activities, and I can actually drag and drop those down. And then what you can see is you can see all these different buttons that are going to be added to my contact. So now I'm going to click Save and click Yes. And then what's going to happen is when the page loads, I now have that send an email button, as well as a variety of others, which we'll go over a little bit later. For now, I'm going to click on this send an email button. And so what it does is it queues up an email that is going to be linked to my John Adams contact. Now, let's say I want to use a template. I don't want to type all this out. I don't want to keep typing the same thing over and over again. So I'm going to click on Select Template, and then I'm going to say, I want to use my new sales notification. Now, what I can do here is just click Send, and it's going to give me an error because there's no email address on that particular contact. So let's say I want to jump back to the John Adams contact here, and what I need to do is fill in that individual's work email. So let's say I'm just going to use my own here for an example. So if you want to send an email, clearly you need to have the emails filled in on the contact record. So now I'm going to try and send this again, and the email was sent. So you can see that anytime an email was sent, you've got a subject down here under the activity history that the email : new sale is made, when the email went out. So this gives you the ability to see a running list of when a specific contact received an email. Now let's say you just wanted to write one from scratch. You can click on that send an email, and you can actually just type out exactly what you want to say. So let's say we're going to call this reaching out as a subject. I'm going to put how are you doing in the body, and then I'm just going to click send. So you can send quick informal emails from Salesforce as well. Now, a lot of times Salesforce customers will get a little bit confused over sending an email and how that works from Salesforce, because it's a common belief that you can use Salesforce as really an inbox replacement, and that's just not true. So with Salesforce, you can send outbound emails, but when these individuals respond back, it's going to go back to your Outlook application or back to Gmail or wherever you're using email for work. So just because you have the ability to send an email doesn't mean that there's a tab in here for your inbox to receive all your inbound emails. Now, there are some apps on the App Exchange that allow you to do something similar to that, where you can send and receive emails, from within Salesforce. There's mixed reviews on them, but if you're a real diehard about Salesforce, you can install those apps and, give that a shot. But the best practice is to let email reside in your email client like Outlook, and then use Salesforce for, more of your workflow, sending of emails and the quoting and all of that. That can all be done in Salesforce, but when you receive emails, they're going to be received back to wherever you receive emails, outside of Salesforce. The next thing we're going to talk about here is the sending of mass emails. There's some important considerations when, mass emailing from Salesforce. So you can select up to 250 recipients at a time in Professional Edition. Those limits are actually increased for Enterprise and other editions up to 500. But you can only queue up, a list of, finite list at any given time. You can't just say, I want to email 10,000 people at a time. There's also a limit on the number of emails you can send a day, which is generally about 1,000 emails a day in a 24-hour period. Salesforce is not intended to be a replacement for like a Constant Contact or Exact Target. It's not a comprehensive, mass emailing tool. But what it does do is allow you to pinpoint recipients based on, any kind of emails that salespeople want to send out or marketing folks want to send out as well. You also need to use pre-created email templates. So unlike the one-time email, you actually have to have a template created in advance. You can't just get a mass email set up and just kind of type out whatever you want it to be. It's got to be a real email template created in advance. You can also track the number of opens on the email, when the opens happen, as far as the date goes. And then you can also create different lists for targeted emailing. So in this specific case, you can say, I only want to email all the CEOs that, all the contacts that are CEOs in, my Salesforce org. So that would be a targeted emailing. So, that's a good use case for the mass emailing in Salesforce. So I'm logged into Salesforce here, and I'm actually going to initiate a mass email. So what I'm going to do is I can either click on leads or contacts. I'm going to click on contacts in this case to do it. So I'm going to click on contacts, scroll down to the bottom, click on mass email contacts. So once I'm on this page, I can then choose the different lists that I might have set up. In this case, I want my CEO contacts list. I'm going to click go. And what that's going to do is it's going to return a list of all of the contacts that have CEO in their title. So how do I know that? I can click on edit. And just like you'd edit any other list view, you can control what filters are used. So you can see the title equals CEO in this specific case. I'm going to click cancel and go back. So, I can actually see what contacts are here. Now, let's say that, most people on this list fit my criteria, but I don't want to send an email to all of them. I can uncheck checkboxes specifically to remove contacts so they won't end up being included in my mass email. So I can also choose other lists. So let's try and choose my all contacts list. Now you'll see that I have more than 500 on the list, and it's not going to let me do that. So you need to make sure that your lists are either 250 or 500. I'm using Enterprise Edition in this case. So my CEO contacts list is a much shorter list. So let's say I'm going to remove a couple of the contacts off here and then click on this next button on the right-hand side. So now I can choose which email I want them to get. So I can either grab, an email from my unfiled public email template. So, let's say I want to send this new assignment email and click next. And then on this really the final page, I have the ability to name the email. So it's actually required. So I can say, mass email 2015, for example. And so what'll happen is, if I leave this checkbox checked, it's going to store a task on the contact with the name of the mass email that was used. That way, when you go back and look at the contact and reference, that contact record, you can actually see the mass email. You can reference it better, I should say. You also have the ability to set up an email signature in Salesforce in the profile area. You can check that checkbox to do that there. You can also schedule when you want the email to go out. So you can change, the date and the time that an email would go out, or you can just choose to send it now. So at this point, I could click send, and if I do that, it's just going to send a mass email with that email template to the contacts I have on the list, and then I'm done. And then that mass email has now gone out. And then when you go back to, a contact record, you're going to be able to scroll down and you can see, for example, the second email here that, an email was sent to the specific contact. Now, it won't delineate between whether that contact received an individual email or if it was a mass email, but it will show you in the activity history that an email has been sent. The next thing we're going to talk about here is creating price books in Salesforce. So there's a couple of things to keep in mind as far as price books are concerned. You create price books in Salesforce for tracking the pricing on individual products. So you can have pricing for wholesale versus retail and maybe minimum quantities that are associated. You can also customize pricing on products on a per customer basis. And you can also do standard versus the custom price books. Now, for the sake of this conversation, it's going to be essentially custom price book. That's what most Salesforce customers do, but you can use a standard price book as well. The only difference there is that with the custom price book, it's custom and you have more flexibility over it, but the standard price book is what Salesforce comes with out of the box. So now we're actually going to take a look at the price books in Salesforce. So I'm logged into Salesforce here, and to get to price books, it's through sort of an obscure path. You actually have to click on the products tab, and then what you do is scroll down and click on the Manage Price Books link down at the bottom, and then you can actually see some of the different price books you have. So you can actually see a list of the price books that you have in the system, or you can create a new one. So I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to call this, wholesale 2016. So I'm going to make this active and then click save. And so what that'll do is it'll create a new price book. So the idea behind a price book is that there is specific pricing related to that price book. So for example, you can see here, I've got this as wholesale. You might very well create one that is, retail, like I mentioned. So here I can actually, what I need to do is I actually need to click this add button, and then I need to actually add a product. So let's say I'm going to choose this, product here. I'm going to use the standard price versus a list price, and then click save. And so what that does is it adds that specific product. You can see the product code there to that specific price book. So you've got this account setup product that is associated with the wholesale price book, but you could for $150, but you could very well have that maybe for retail at $250. So the idea behind price books in Salesforce is that you sell products or you sell services, and you may have different rates for those same exact services or products under different situations. And those situations are really categorized using that price book record. So your price books should be organized in a logical manner where when you go to add a product to an opportunity, which we'll do later on, the first thing you're asked is which price book you want to use. And so by adding that price book to the opportunity, any products you add after the fact are going to inherit that specific pricing model. We also have the ability to, turn off or deactivate price book. So I can go back into this price book and I can click archive. And what that'll do is it will actually save this particular price book. So this isn't deleting, it's actually saving it. And what this does is that way when I go back and run reports or I look at records that are associated with this price book, I'm still able to see them. So now I can click on this archive button, and I'll click OK to confirm. So you can see that that price book has now been archived. I can no longer see it or reference it. However, if I look at an opportunity with products, those products are going to maintain that pricing that they inherited from that price book originally. Whereas opposed to if you delete a price book, it's going to mess up, reports and other stuff. So you always want to make sure don't delete a price book. You can just archive it, and that's the safest way to go about that. The next thing we're going to talk about here is creating products. Products in Salesforce are, really records for you to track, the products you're selling or the services that you're selling as well. So it's meant for you to create really a catalog of all your products and services. You add them to opportunities and quotes for in-depth reporting. So what that means is, when you go to view a report, rather than just seeing a customer name, a date, and a dollar amount, you can actually see what products or services were quoted along with that, opportunity. You can also create custom fields, for example, for cost reporting. So you can actually have a field on products for, your cost. So that way you can go back and run reports later on and say, well, my cost for products, $40, we sold it for $100. And then you can get a quick report from that and say, well, there's a $60, spread or a margin on that specific product. You can also rename products and call them services. Funny enough, 80% of America, is service-based, but, every CRM on the planet calls them products. So you can actually go in and rename products and actually call them services and use them in the exact same way. And for example, that quantity field, that can be for hours. If you're like a time and materials type business, then you can also, have a quantity there for the number of hours. And then you use the dollar amount to be what that hourly rate would be. So that's sort of a neat workaround for those of you that work in, professional services, for example. So now I'm actually going to jump into Salesforce and demonstrate creating a product here. So I'm going to click on this products tab. And, this page can be probably one of the most confusing tab home pages that there is. You have the ability to see price books by list. You can see product views. You can also see asset views. And essentially what assets are is if you've got a customer that makes a purchase, you can have the products that they purchased added to their account as assets. So that's what that's about. But for the purpose of this specific lesson, we're going to click on this new button. So you need to scroll down a little bit. It's not obvious. You need to scroll down and click on the new button here. And then you have the ability to add a product. So here we're going to put, widget 2000 and, 2000A, let's say the model number. We also have some other fields where we can choose, product code. So we're going to choose a product code here. And then we also need this to be active. Now we have the ability to just save at this point. But what you should do is click on Save and Add Price. That way you can complete the creation process. Otherwise, if you don't, you're not going to be able to add that product to a specific opportunity. So for the standard price, I'm going to put 5,000 and then click Save. Now what happens is it takes you back to the product page. You can see your product name, you can see the product code, and that it's active. Well, you might believe that you're done, but you're not. Now you actually have to add it to a price book. So a lot of you might consider this to be a redundant step, because why would you need to add it to a price book if you've got a standard price on there? Well, exactly for all the reasons that we mentioned when going over price books, that you may have a product that you sell for a different amount to different individuals. So for example, here, what I'm going to do is click on this Add to Price Book button. And I'm going to choose, an active price book, which I can, and click Select there. And then this is where price books differentiate between products. So you have this standard price of $5,000 for this product. Now I can just check this checkbox and it'll just grab that standard price and add it to the price book. But in this specific case, maybe I want to change it to be, 2,000, and then I want to save. So what I just did is, whenever this widget is added to an opportunity using this price book, instead of using that $5,000 standard price, it's going to use the $2,000 standard price. So that gives users and managers the ability to say, I want specific pricing based on certain scenarios. So again, you can add those price books to an opportunity and then grab products on a per price book basis. So that's what that's for. And now you're done. So you've created the product with the product name, you have a product code and it's active. Make sure to check that active checkbox. You've added the standard price, and you've also got the list price here on a per price book basis. So the next thing we're going to talk about here is creating opportunities in Salesforce. So opportunities in Salesforce, as I mentioned before, allows you to track your sales and potential sales and also forecast on them. So what I mean by that is you can run reports and see what opportunities are scheduled to close based on their close date and dollar amount, as well as any stage information. You can also do reports of products and any discounts you have, and then report on win rates and overall sales effectiveness. So what that means is if you have 100 opportunities and 10 of them get closed, then you can say, well, we've got a 10% win rate on those opportunities. So an opportunity in Salesforce is really there for your salespeople to manage their pipeline. If you've got any open proposals or open quotes, those would all be opportunities in Salesforce. So now we're going to jump into Salesforce and actually create an opportunity. So I'm logged in here. I'm back at the home tab. What I need to do is start by clicking on an account. So on this account record, I can actually click this new opportunity button. You can also create an opportunity from the opportunities tab. So I can click on that tab and click new here. The trouble with that is that you do need to link it to an account of some type most of the time. So I do recommend navigating to the opportunity record from the account. That way it's automatically filled in. What I mean by that is I can click on new opportunity and that account is already filled in there. You certainly don't have to do it that way. That's what I recommend. You can just create it directly from the opportunities tab, but a lot of times there's confusion over which account was used, and if there's accounts with similar names or duplicate names, you might actually link the opportunity to the wrong account. If you use my method, then you're going through the account and so it's linked and it's a sure thing. So at this point, I've got a couple of different required fields here. So I've got, for example, like primary contact and referred by. So I'm just going to fill those in and click save so I can keep on moving through. So if you look here, this is exactly what I was referring to. by filling in those fields, you might have, multiple records associated. When this happens, you need to click on this lookup field, and then you need to actually, manually select which particular contact you're talking about, and then click Save. So once you click Save, your opportunity is going to be saved. And so what happens there is, you're looking at this opportunity from a viewing perspective rather than edit. Over here on the right-hand side, you can then do things like, adjust the dollar amount. You can also adjust the stage or the close date. So for example, here, I want to change the stage to proposal. I want to change the close date to, let's say, December 31st, and I want to save. So here what this means is that you've got a couple of required fields. So if I click edit again, you can see that, close date's required, stage is required. So what would happen if I then remove that close date and tried to save? You would see that it's a required field. So the close date is another area in Salesforce where, a lot of Salesforce customers are confused or they're not exactly sure how to use it. Really, that close date should be the actual close date or the forecasted close date. And, if it would be great if there would be some way to rename it to be, forecasted close date before the opportunity was signed, and then the name changes to actual close date once it is signed. Salesforce doesn't do that though, but that's essentially what it's for. If the opportunity hasn't been signed, hasn't been won, then you need to choose a close date that best represents when that'll happen. And for a lot of sales teams, it's sort of impossible to pinpoint an actual sales date. So, best practice might be to just make it for the last day of any given month. So if you think this will probably close in February, just make it for the end of February and just choose the last date of February. Or if you think it's going to be, today, you can make it today. But a lot of times sales teams will choose and forecast based on the month. They'll say, well, I think it'll close next month. Just make it for the last day of that month. And then when sales managers and owners go to run reports, they can see a forecast based on, month. That nobody's going to look at a forecast on a per day basis for most industries. So all that matters is what month is it going to close. It really doesn't matter as much as far as the specific date goes. Now, when you go to actually mark this as closed won, for example, that's when it matters. So when you get, a signature on the dotted line, you need to make sure that the close date is reflective of when it was actually signed. So here, for example, I'm going to click save, and then, what it's going to do is it's going to allow me to save as, closed won as well as the close date. Here I'm being prompted to choose a project value. So here I'm going to choose 500 and then click save. So now you can see that I've got a closed won opportunity for $500 on today's date. So, it's really simple as far as creating, an opportunity record itself goes here. Now, let's say on my opportunity here that I actually want to add products. I can do that by scrolling down and clicking on Add Product. I can then check, different checkboxes and click Save, select here, and then I have the ability to actually choose what quantity I want to have these products listed on the opportunity. I can also adjust the sales price, the date, anything else like the line description. And then at this point I can click save, and then what will happen is those products are then added to the opportunity. Now, if you look here, I can no longer edit this amount field. Even if I click on the edit button, it's going to be locked. And so what happens is when you add products to an opportunity, it locks that amount field. And so you can't change it unless you remove these products from the opportunity. But it's very easy to add those products, and then you can go back and run reports on them and all of that. So essentially that's how you create an opportunity, as well as adding products down below. Now, when I clicked add product before, I wasn't prompted to choose a price book. Now, if you have more than one active price book, you will be prompted. But if you only have one price book, you won't be prompted. So if you're in a business where your pricing is sort of streamlined, then you'll never be asked which price book to use. But again, going back to that retail versus wholesale scenario, if you've got more than one price book, you'll be prompted to choose one, and then the products and the pricing will be made available to be added to this opportunity likewise. The next thing we're going to go over here is creating activities in Salesforce. In Salesforce, you have essentially two different types of activities, tasks and events. So what you want to do is use date-sensitive, things you need to do, tasks, as a task record in Salesforce, as the name implies. If it's time-sensitive, then you use the events record. So it's sort of a quirky area because technically tasks and events are both under the activities banner. So for example, when you're using, data export or import tools, technically they're all just activities. But, as far as the actual usability of the system goes, a task would be something that needs to be done by the end of a given day, whereas events, they actually have to be done in at a specific time of the day, like a meeting. You can also log activities, these tasks and events on any object in Salesforce. So any custom object you create, all the standard objects, you can create, different tasks and events on them. So you can have them on leads or accounts, opportunities, of course, cases, or any custom objects. So they're sort of everywhere. And, any open tasks you have will also be visible on your homepage, as well as your itinerary for your calendar items, which we'll show here in a second. So I'm logged into Salesforce here. I'm on the Salesforce homepage, and right away I can see my activities. So for starters, I can see that I've got a task that needs to be completed here, a follow-up call, but I don't have any relevant information over here on the right-hand side. I also have the ability to see calendars, so I can see, any upcoming meetings that I have. I can see them here. So the homepage is meant to be the starting point for any tasks or meetings that you have. Now, this task is essentially, empty, and a lot of times that happens when users will click on this new button and you create a task. You just, throw in a subject in there and you never really bother to link it to any record. That's not really the best way to go about it. The best thing to do is navigate to the record in question, let's say our John Adams contact, and then scroll down here. And then what you could do is click on this new task button and say, call back, for example. And then you choose a due date, and then what you could do is click save. And then when you go back to your homepage, you can then see that, okay, you've got a callback task with John, and it's actually linked to a specific account and contact record rather than just being empty here. So if you find yourself staring at a list of tasks where they're not related to any records, it's going to be pretty confusing. So the best thing to do is actually ensure that when you create a task, you're actually linking it to something accordingly. So just to go over that again, I can go back to a contact record. I can click on this new task button. And then on the task page, it's real simple. I choose a subject. I can also have a predetermined list, like let's say send a letter. I can choose a due date or leave the due date empty, which I don't recommend. It sort of defeats the purpose of the task. And then you click save here. And so that's really all there is to it. You can also create a list of recurring tasks. So if there's something you have to do, like every Monday at 8 a.m., for example, you can schedule that here. So, you can also calculate and put in when you want that recurring task to end. But that's not how most Salesforce customers use it. It's meant for those one-off tasks that you need to get done. And a side note is you can also have tasks created via workflow rules, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But this is your home page where you can actually see those tasks. Now, moving on to events. This events section will also synchronize with Outlook or whatever calendar you're using. So I can click on this new event button here. And I can choose a subject for the event, let's say meeting for proposal review, for example. And then I can also choose a start and end time. So let's say I want the start and end to be on the 30th. I can also choose, let's say 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., for example. And then I can click save. And what that'll do is it'll create a new event for me. But as you might guess, I'm going to run into that same problem by creating an event here that I don't actually link to a record. So that's the issue there. So I can always go back to this event and I can edit it. And then over here on the right-hand side, I could type in, let's say John Adams as the contact. And then, I could click on the lookup glass and select the right contact and all of that. Usually it's better to just have users go right to the record in question. That way there's no confusion as to who the event is with, and then actually create the event off of that specific record. That way there's just no confusion, because it's really easy for users to, select what the opportunity is or what the account is. There's just, so much going on in Salesforce that it's really easy to link to the wrong person or the wrong thing. So, that being said, that's really the summary of the activities that are in Salesforce. They're viewed on the home page. You can also install apps that actually will give you a My Activities tab up at the top, but that's not standard functionality. But just as a side note, if you actually want a tab, you can see that there as well. The only other area that can be helpful is to look at events in a multi-user view. So if I click on this icon down here, I can actually see a list of some of the users in this specific Salesforce account. I can also create, different list views. I can look at their calendars on a, monthly basis or weekly basis, or I can even see a list of specific events here as well. So this is another area that you can use. Again, it's not that common, but you can certainly use this, activities area rather than just use the home page if you're interested in, drilling down to it at that level. The next thing we're going to talk about here is creating a web to lead form in Salesforce. A web to lead form allows you to collect and capture leads from a website into Salesforce very easily. So you can create an HTML form that can be posted anywhere online. You can also use lead assignment rules to control, salesperson ownership. You can also create a hidden field to indicate the source of the lead. So let's say you've got, one web to lead form that you want to put on 5 different websites. Let's say you've got your main company site and you've got 3 or 4 other sites. What you do is you can create a hidden field in Salesforce called, source or, received from, and it's just a text field essentially. And, you can have your web developer hide that field online on the public site, and that way when the form's filled out, it just automatically passes in, and that way you can actually see where the leads came from if you end up using the web to lead form from more than one site. Now, some important considerations on the web to lead form. It's extremely limited in its purpose, so it just does one thing. It literally allows you to create a lead from a website. It doesn't do anything more than that. So, sometimes customers will think that it's some kind of a two-way form or it's dynamically updated and all this other kind of stuff. That's just not the case. So it's actual HTML that's generated, which we'll show here in a second, and then your web developer copies and pastes that online to then be modified to the format and the look and feel of the rest of your website. So it's simply an HTML form. It just does a post into Salesforce and creates that lead, and that's it. Usually leads are created within a minute or two, 2 minutes at the most, but usually those leads are created pretty quickly as long as that form is working properly. So we're going to jump into Salesforce and actually create a web to lead form. So I'm going to click on Setup in the top right corner. Over on the left-hand side here, I'm going to click Customize, and then I'm going to click on Leads, and then I can click on Web to Lead. So what that does is allows me to start this web to lead sort of wizard here. So I already have web to lead enabled by checking on that checkbox. If I want it disabled for whatever reason, maybe I'm getting a lot of spam or I just don't want it used at all, I can uncheck that and save it accordingly. But really the next step here, and really one of the only steps, is click on this Create Web to Lead form. So this is where I go to build my form. So I can move the available fields over from the left-hand side over to the right-hand side, and then I can choose, what I want my, return URL to be. So the return URL is the page that a submitter is sent to after they've actually submitted, their information. So in this case, I don't really have a thank you page, but your web team would probably have one set up for what the user sees after they make that submission. Also, something to note is over on the right-hand side, you don't need all these fields. For example, less is usually more when it comes to collecting information, from people online. So, for example, if you don't need the city, don't put the city, However, something to keep in mind is that if you've got lead assignment rules that you want to run when a new lead comes in, you need to make sure you're collecting that relevant information. So let's say you're creating lead assignment rules based on the state. Where, geographically did that lead come in from their state. You should include that. That way you can actually capture it and then write a lead assignment rule based on it. So the last step here is to click on this Generate button. So now I've got my web to lead form code. So What you do is you just copy this and email it to, your webmaster, whoever handles your website. But, for those of you that are a little bit familiar with HTML, it's very, very simple. So you basically have a form up here with, an org ID. So the OID that's the org ID for your specific instance of Salesforce. And you also have the return URL here. There's a lot of comments here to sort of walk you through it. Really, as long as you don't touch anything up top, you're not going to be able to break this. And then just to expand this a little bit here, you can also see all the individual fields. So you could see that first name field, the last name field, and all of that. And then you can see the ID for that, specific field. And then you just submit. Down here at the bottom is that submit button. So you can change that and make it whatever you want it to be. But essentially, you just copy this and paste it into a text file or an email, and then your web developer can copy this and put it on your website. Now, it will take formatting in order for it to look like your website, but it's very simple to do so. So that is essentially the web to lead function in Salesforce. The next thing we're going to talk about here are the lead assignment rules. Lead assignment rules do exactly what the name implies. It assigns leads to users or queues. So it's got to be an active user, someone that has an active Salesforce license, or it can be a queue like, inbound leads or unassigned leads. It can just be a holding area if that's what you want it to be. So there's some important points to keep in mind that, these rules will route the new leads to the most appropriate salesperson based on the logic you set up, which we'll go over here in a minute. You can also choose whether or not they receive an email notification to say, hey, you've got a new lead that's assigned to you. And you can also filter based on criteria such as geography. Geography is a really easy one. Everybody knows it, so it's used in a lot of examples. You can actually have it based on, things like budget or product interest or even the size of the company. So if you've got a lead with 5,000 employees, maybe that goes to like a VP of sales versus a company with 3 employees. Maybe that can just go to any salesperson. So you can use lead assignment rules to really custom tailor who receives those leads. And a common question that we get is also regarding the ability to sort of round robin leads. So Salesforce doesn't have an out-of-the-box menu-driven, way to do round-robin assignments. There are apps on the App Exchange that do that for you. Also with Enterprise Edition, you can create, workflow rules and some code to do that. But the way lead assignment rules work is a lead comes in, the criteria is evaluated, and it's assigned to whoever you want it to be assigned to based on that criteria. You can't have, more than one assigned to based on the same criteria like a round robin would be. So that's just an important consideration as well. So I've jumped back into Salesforce here and we're going to create a lead assignment rule. So I clicked on setup in the top right hand corner and I'm going to come over here to customize and leads, and I can actually see my lead assignments role link over here. So I've got one inbound lead assignment rule. Now, you can create multiple assignment rules, but you can only have one active at a time. You can actually see that here. So you can create multiple lead assignment rules that are inactive, but you have to choose which one you want to be active. So here's an example of, an inbound lead assignment rule. I've got my rule name and, it's active and I can click save. And then the criteria here are down below. So I can have these different rule entries. So if the city equals Pasadena, where we're located, then I can be, I'll be assigned to that specific lead. But what happens if it's not, the lead is not in Pasadena? So in this case, I'm going to choose something else. Let's say the city of, San Francisco. I chose the sort order as number 2 because what happens is Salesforce will evaluate your criteria in a specific order to prevent any kind of confusion or conflicts in the system. So I've got sort order as 2 because I want this to be the next criteria that's evaluated. Now I can make this criteria really complicated. Just like in a list view, I can add, filter logic and all of that. That's really not my intention here. But then I can come over here and say, I want the user to be assigned, Mary or Jane or whomever else is in the system. So in this case, for example, I'm going to choose, Mark, and then I'm going to click save. So as that's saving, what's happening is Salesforce is going to save that rule and say, okay, when a new lead comes in, this is what we're going to do. We're going to look and see if the city equals Pasadena. If it does, then assign this lead to Justin. If the lead comes in and the city equals San Francisco, assign it to, Mark. So if you've got leads that are in certain cities where you have salespeople, that's exactly what these, lead assignments are for. So you can actually reorder them, or you can create new rule entries, new criteria. So it's really simple to do that. Just keep in mind, you need to keep incrementing that sort order, or change it however you want. But as time goes on, of course, if you've got 5 or 10 different rule entries, you could very well have 5 or 10 different of these lines that you need to make sure are being run in the correct order. So that's essentially it for lead assignment rules. You can also come in here and edit it and make it inactive if you want. And then what will happen is if you make it inactive, then any leads that come in will just be the default lead owner, which is usually the system administrator. Salesforce isn't going to assign the leads to any salesperson. So just be careful if you uncheck that active checkbox that, when those leads come in, someone should be on the lookout for them. So the next thing we're going to talk about here is the creation of a lead queue. So inside Salesforce, you've got users. That's a given. That's easy. Then you have what we call queues. So a queue is essentially call it a fake user or a stand-in user where you can actually assign different records. Leads and cases tend to be the most commonly used with queues. And so a queue does not take up a user license. It's just a holding area. So generally queues are used for like cold or disqualified leads, or any kind of leads that you really don't need active working on. However, there are a lot of organizations that will have some kind of a triage process where when a lead comes in, they want the lead to go to the unassigned lead queue, and then a sales manager will sort of divvy out the leads based on, that sales manager's, sort of subjective preference. So rather than have the system assign the leads, you can have someone else simply monitor that lead queue. So for example, if they're looking at a lead queue and it has 10 leads on it, if someone, a potential customer fills out a form online, they'll see that 11th lead come in when they refresh that list. So if you're going to use a queue, just keep in mind that, someone's going to need to monitor it, and, it does take a little bit more, maintenance as opposed to just having a lead assigned directly to a user. So now we're actually going to create a queue in Salesforce. So I'm going to click on Setup in the top right corner. I'm going to come over here to Manage Users and click on Queues. So you can see that I've got my unassigned lead queue. I can also create a new one by clicking on this new button here. So for example, let's call this, disqualified leads. And I can also choose a queue email. So I can have, a specific email go out to, members, or to a specific email address when certain things happen with a queue. In this case, I'm just going to leave it blank. Usually it's not needed. So I can scroll down here and look under supported objects. So these are all of the objects in this Salesforce org that I have that I want to be made available for the queue. So I'm going to choose, lead, for example. You could also choose, contracts or, licenses or other things, or cases, of course. But for now, I'm just going to choose the lead object because that's what I want the queue to be, is for lead records. So as I keep scrolling down here, I also need to choose users. So by the default option here, no one has access to this queue. What you have to do is come in here and actually selectively add them. So for example, if I've got a group set up for executives, I can choose them. Let's say I've got other managers, or maybe I want staff. I want everyone to be involved here. I can also choose all internal users, and that'll just be everybody at the organization. I also have the ability to choose based on roles. So let's say I want to have a project manager and, the CEO, have access to this particular queue. I can select them there. And then I can also do roles and subordinates. So let's say you want the, the legal team to have access to this queue. If I add role and subordinates for the chief legal officer, everyone, at that level and below will have access to the queue. And then lastly, I can choose individuals. So I can come in here and just, be real selective and say, I want, Justin Davis myself to be able to have access to this disqualified leads queue. So now I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And now you can see that, I've got my disqualified leads queue ready to go here. Now, how exactly is this used? So I'm going to copy this queue name and jump back over to leads. So let's say I've got my John Adams lead here. Now, as you can see, Justin Davis is a lead owner, but what we realized is this lead's a really cold lead. So what I'm going to do is change the ownership here, and you'll see that now there's a drop-down menu of queue. So I'm going to copy and paste that queue name here, and I'm going to click Save. Now what that's going to do is it's going to change the lead owner to be that disqualified leads queue. So it's actually no longer owned by Justin or anyone else in the system. It's owned by the queue itself. So what you'd want to do is make sure that you have, list view, for example, of, those disqualified leads, and then choose from a queue here, let's say disqualified leads, and click Save. And then you can actually, see those disqualified leads, because if you don't, those leads will disappear into a big black hole because nobody owns them. They're just in the queue. So there's, a little bit of danger in assigning records to the queue if the queue itself is not properly managed. So it's important that, when you assign leads to a queue that, there's a plan in place. It's not just, just a black hole for where records go that nobody knows what to do with them, which, does happen a lot. So that's just a lesson there on creating queues. You can also create queues on, cases. That's the other really, popular sort of use case for them. You can have as many queues as you want, and, this is where you access those queues in Salesforce. The next thing we're going to talk about here is the creation of an auto response rule. So in Salesforce, there's a feature called auto response that allows you to have emails sent back to someone once they've submitted a lead or, a case in certain cases. So in this case, you can have a customized response based on lead interest. So if you've got a lead that, is interested in making a purchase on a specific product, you can tailor your auto response to be based on that criteria. You can also use HTML or plain text email templates. If it's going to be sent back to potential sales prospect, you should probably use an HTML template. That way it looks nicer. However, if it's like a customer service type inquiry, you probably don't need it to be as nice. It can just be more of a confirmation of your request has been received type of an email. And you can also choose where that from email address comes from. So, with active rules, this allows you to say, I want this email to go to someone once that submission comes in. So we're back into Salesforce now. So I'm going to click on Setup in the top right-hand corner. Over on the left-hand side, I'm going to go to Customize, Leads, and then you can see here I've got my lead auto response rules. So on this page, you can see I have one active rule, and I'm going to click on this rule here. So very similar to a lead assignment rule, what I do is I come in here and I add a rule entry. So let's say I want the order to be, number 2, whenever the city is, blank. And then what I can do is I can choose where I want that to come from. So I can say, for example, Justin Davis, and use my email address, and this will actually be in that from field. Now I need to choose the email template that's used. So I'm going to pull this up, and I'm going to choose the follow-up template, and click Save. Now once that's done, you can actually see that I've got my rule created here. Now something interesting to note is that you can have this one active rule, but the email template is determined based on the criteria. So just like I mentioned before, if someone's interested in a specific product area or there's a specific geography involved, you custom tailor the template that gets sent. So as opposed to a lead assignment rule where the user is assigned to a lead based on criteria, here it's actually which email goes out based on criteria. So, these auto response rules are really simple. You can also edit them and, deactivate them accordingly. So I'm going to come over here and, deactivate it. So if you deactivate it, then when someone makes, for example, that web to lead submission, they are not going to get an email back, thanking them for their response or what have you. So that's just something to keep in mind. But you can also turn it on, turn it off as you see fit. You can also add other rule entries accordingly. The next thing we're going to go over here is the creation of campaigns in Salesforce. Campaigns in Salesforce are records that really serve as a holding area for your marketing activities. So a very common misconception is that this is where mass email happens because, in this day and age, everybody automatically assumes that if you have a campaign, it's got to be a mass email, right? So that's not the case at all. So a campaign record is really a record to track and store all of your different marketing efforts, the ROI on them. This could be trade shows, workshops, direct mail, even a cold calling campaign can be created as a campaign record. And so this gives you the ability to run reports and see what your ROI is. So you spent $5,000 attending a trade show, but you got back $10,000 in customer sales, so that would be an example of a use of a campaign record. It can also be mass emails. So for example, let's say you're using, Pardot or ExactTarget or some other system to send mass emails. What you do is create a campaign and say, okay, we're going to send a newsletter every 3 months. And so we're going to create a new campaign for each of those months. We're going to have the winter newsletter, the spring newsletter, the summer newsletter go out. And then there's a campaign record in Salesforce to actually track where that person, heard about your company. So the trick with that is that when contact or lead comes in, you need to manually associate that record with a campaign record. So it doesn't do it automatically for you. So it's a lot less automated than a lot of customers believe. The campaign record is a placeholder that you've got to work and work hard. It doesn't automatically do anything for you. It's just a placeholder for you to run reports against. Some key points here to remember is that for a user to have access to campaigns, they need to have that marketing user checkbox checked on their user record. So you can also track your marketing efforts based on types and categories, and then you can also log campaigns against leads, contacts, and opportunities. Now you can create like a lookup field to accounts or cases or other records and then track campaigns against them. It's not recommended because usually campaigns are intended to be marketed to specific individuals rather than just a broad company. But you can certainly create a lookup, field from accounts to campaigns and then go back and run a report on that and say, well, how many accounts came in from a specific campaign? So that's something you can do if you'd like. So now I'm going to jump back into Salesforce here and we're going to actually click on a campaigns tab and check this out. So the campaigns tab is much like other tabs. You've got list views. You can also create a new campaign record, which is what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to call this the spring newsletter campaign. And I'm going to choose active for, to make this campaign active in Salesforce. And the status, I'm actually going to leave it as planned here. So now I'm going to click save. And then it creates the basis of a campaign. So first of all, I can choose what the type is. Is it email, telemarketing, seminar or conference, etc. I can also link it to a parent campaign. If I have any other campaigns in the system, I can do that here as well. I can also add a description for whatever this particular, marketing initiative is going to be. And then down here, I can add opportunities or campaign members. I can view different fields such as expected revenue, budgeted cost, etc. So let's say that, my budgeted cost is $5,000. I expect my revenue to be, $12,500. But the budget ran over a little bit and we ended up spending a little bit more than we actually thought. So, this gives you the ability to go back and run reports and say, okay, well, we spent, a little more than $5,000 and we got $12,000 as a result of our efforts. That was a successful campaign. So scrolling down here, this is where you actually will start linking different records to the campaign. So there's an area called campaign members that is very important for you to understand. So you can add these members through searching, importing a file. You can also edit members through search, or you can update and add members via an import file. You can also do that up here up top, same button. So for example, in this case, I'm going to add members to this. So I'm going to choose, let's say, some contacts. I'm going to click go. I just want to see all my contacts. So here, I'm just going to choose a bunch of different contacts I have in the system. Or I can also use a list view and add them there as well. So I'm going to add with the status. Let's say I'm going to choose sent. And then now these 4 members have been added to the campaign. So if I go back to the spring newsletter, you'll see I now have 4 contacts here. There are 4 campaign members that are associated with this specific campaign. Now keep in mind, this doesn't mean that now they get a mass email. It just means that I'm being organized in my daily routine, and I've got one place where I can look at a campaign and see which contacts or leads have been associated with it. I also have the ability to link an opportunity. So if I want, I can link an opportunity using that primary campaign field on the opportunity record, and that gets linked to campaigns as well. So campaigns is not an area that's used real heavily, but it is important for you to understand it is on the Salesforce certification exam as well. That it's a placeholder for marketers to just understand what they've spent and then what sales have been a result of that expenditure. The next area we're going to go over here is record types. So record types in Salesforce are, a very special feature that allows you to customize page layouts based on the record type of that specific record. It's available on all standard and custom objects, and you can also control access to it at the profile level. Now, a use case for this would be, for example, if you look over here on the right-hand side, you've got a client record type, a partner record type, and then a vendor record type. So these would be 3 good examples where you would actually use record types because, you wouldn't imagine that the fields that you track on those 3 different records would be similar. So for example, let's say in a client record, you want to track things like their, annual revenue and their budget, how many people they have. That's all pretty standard for an account. But let's say it's a partner record. All of that other information is important, but you need more information than that. You need to understand, are they an active partner? How are they working with you? Are they sending you referrals? So you'd add more fields there. And then with a vendor record, it's totally different than the other 2 because those would be companies that you are a customer of, and so you want to track those. So it could be your phone company, your marketing company, or web development company. So on a vendor record, you might have other things like, what are the contracts that you might have with that specific vendor, or, what kind of information do they regularly need from you, or, you can even store information like usernames and passwords to any kind of systems that they may give you access to. So with these record types in Salesforce, we have the ability to sort of segment all of that out. So one common misconception on record types is that you can control record access based on giving a profile access to a record type or not. And that's just simply not the case. So if you restrict someone's profile from having access to a record type, that doesn't mean that they can't see a record with that record type. It just means they can't create a record with that record type. So they can still see the record. They just don't have the ability to create a record with that record type. So in short, you can't restrict record access by restricting record type access. And unfortunately, all the names sound the same here. Everything's a record, everything's a type, but it's just true. So if you want to control security, check out the security lesson of this course. But for now, we're just going to talk about these record types and what they can do. So for example, here I'm logged into Salesforce, and I'm going to click on Setup in the top right-hand corner. So I'm going to come over to Customize, and I'm going to click on Accounts and click on this record types link. So I can see that I've got 3 record types set up here. So what this means is I'm going to open up this Accounts tab and click on New, and I'm presented with a couple of different options. So these options match the options here. Now let's say I want to choose Client. Now when I choose Client, I'm presented with this list of fields. But let's say I want to choose, Vendor. The vendor has different fields. So for example, the industry has gone away, the market segment's gone away. There's really just a few required fields here. I also have a service number, so that might be like my account number with them, etc. So, record types allow you to control which fields are displayed based on the type selected. So let's say I want to choose, a partner record type. So I'm going to choose, Salesforce as a partner. I've got Salesforce as the website address here. And then I can also choose employee range, something I didn't have on those other page layouts. So I'm going to choose, 21 to 100 and click Save. So now that I've clicked save, I've got, this account set up using that specific record type. And so the idea behind this is to, really stay organized with what different fields you're requiring users to fill out based on the record type selected. So to come over here, I can also create a new record type. I can also modify page layout assignments. So that's also an important consideration. So I'm going to click on this page layout assignment button, and I'm going to click edit assignment. So here I've got my master. I've got the client, partner, vendor. Master is always the default. So for example, I can come over and say, okay, for the business analyst on staff, if it's a client, record type, I actually want them to see the vendor layout, something like that. Or maybe for a project manager, I want them to have, the partner layout there, or let's say a client layout for the partner record type. So you can sort of mix and match everything. And, if I was to click save, it'll make those changes. I can also say for, vendors, I want it to get, the client page layout. Now, the reason that these page layouts line up well with record types is because that's exactly how I've created them. So if I come over here under Customize and Accounts and Page Layouts, you can see that I've actually created page layouts to match my record types. Now, this is somewhat of a best practice. It's one I personally recommend. But if you have if you name your page layout for the record type, it's going to be very, very easy, going forward to be organized with what layouts are linked to what record types. And then again, I can come over here and I can edit the assignment through the page layouts as well. Now, if I want to create a new record type, I can do that easily. So I go back under Accounts, click on Record Types. So under Record Types here, I can click on, New. So maybe this might be, subcontractor or something along those lines. So I want to have a new subcontractor record type. I can make it active. I can also copy down. Let's say partner is real close to subcontractor, so I can copy from an existing record type. I can also come over here and enable it for a specific profile. Now again, this doesn't mean that if they don't have it enabled that it's restricted. It just means if they do, that they can actually create a record using that record type. So I'm just going to enable it for everybody and click Next. And here I have the ability to choose layout. Now, subcontractor is really similar to, a partner, for example. So I'm just going to choose the partner layout. That works for me. I can also come down here and say, well, for business analysts, I want them to see the client layout whenever the subcontractor, layout is selected. So in this case, I'm not. I just want everybody to get the same. So I'm going to leave it as partner, and I'm going to click Save. So now my subcontractor record type has been created. I also have the ability to edit the different pick lists, so the different drop-down menus. So the pick lists and drop-down menus are also dependent based on the record type. So if I come over here to type and I click edit, for example, I can choose, what pick list values are available. I can also come under here and say, market, for example. Maybe when the subcontractor record type is selected, government's never involved, and maybe nonprofits never involved for that matter. So I can also choose, corporate as the default and click save. So that makes it easy. So whenever I create a subcontractor account, using that record type, those are the options that I see. So now I'm going to click subcontractor here, and you can see that I've got my subcontractor layout here. But that's a real simple, use case for record types. You can use them across standard or custom objects, and it's really there to control what fields are displayed, based on that specific use case of that record. So now we're actually going to look in Salesforce to see where all of this can be achieved. So in Salesforce, the first thing I'm going to do is click on Setup, and I'm going to go over to the Communication Templates area and click on Email Templates. So here is where those 3 email templates would have been created. So if United Containers wanted to use one of those 3 emails on a specific lead assignment or auto response, they could have created that email template here just as we discussed. Clicking on new email, click on text, and then create their email template accordingly. Then once that was done, they would then have created lead assignment rules. So I'm going to click on leads, go over to the lead assignment rule area, and then I've got, my inbound leads as my lead assignment. We talked about that as well. So a lead assignment rule can automatically assign leads based on that specific criteria. And then lastly, an unassigned lead queue was created. So if I come under Manage Users and click on Queues here, I have the ability to see I've got my unassigned lead queue already set up. This is something that we went over earlier. So all of those leads that are cold and disqualified, those are all going to be going to that unassigned lead queue. And so the lead assignment rule can actually look and say if it's a cold lead or not. For example, in the United Containers case, let's see a lead comes in for New Zealand, some geography they don't even service. They can have that New Zealand lead routed to the unassigned lead queue as just a holding area, because in reality, there's nobody to service a lead from New Zealand. They're based in the United States. And so that would be another example of being able to move those cold or disqualified leads directly to a queue. That way, the salespeople never even have to bother with them. So I'm logged into Salesforce here, and we're going to go to that report that was created for sales forecasting. So I'm going to click on the Reports tab, and here I have my sales forecast report. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And as you can see here, we have a sales forecast report broken down by the opportunity owner, Jane, Justin, and Mark. And then we also have the close dates across the top here. So January all the way out until May. And you can see the different forecasted opportunities by the dollar amounts totaled by each month. So you can see here that we've got 118,000 or so forecasted for close in February, but only a few for March and then all the way out until May. Over here on the far right-hand side, you can see the grand totals of each. So you can see that Justin, for example, has roughly 100,000, Mark roughly 60,000, and then Jane here has 28,000. We've also scheduled this report to run. So I've clicked on this drop-down arrow and I clicked on Scheduled Future Runs here. So as you can see, it's set up for this report to be emailed to these 3 users. And what I did is I scheduled that to go out every weekday at 9 a.m. Now, we will get more in depth about scheduling reports and creating reports a little bit later on in this course. But for now, this is what the solution was for United Containers' problem, because what will happen is every weekday at 9 a.m., this sales forecast is just going to be emailed out to, to those individuals. So, there's no more updating of spreadsheets and manual report creation, all of that. It's just going to come from Salesforce automatically. So the key takeaways for this lesson is that leads, contacts, accounts, and opportunities are the foundation of the Sales Cloud. Products and price books are used to reference pricing information, and lead assignment rules can assign record ownership based on certain criteria. Record types are also used to segment different types of data.
Thanks, Justin. This certainly helped. Now I'll be able to understand Salesforce and implement it better.
You are welcome, Debbie. Along with managing inbound leads, including assignment, logging activities, and follow-up, salespeople are not able to generate and email quotations quickly to prospective customers. We will cover it in the next lesson.